This is so interesting because I'm typically an audience participation, interactive kind of girl, and this is giving me flashbacks to the Zoom era. Like, are you guys all on mute right now? That's what. So please feel free to chime in if things interest you or get you going. But Cicely,
Yes. Oh, we are so excited to be here, and we're so thankful that we received the invitation to be before you this morning. My name is Cicely Tomlinson. My pronouns are she, hers. I am a DC native. I know that not many people know that.
Yeah, we got one more for you. Okay, great.
Yes.
Club of two.
I love it. I've been with Mutual of Omaha for 17 years now. I started out in government affairs and moved over to their DEI team. And as in the intro, I also co-founded Diversity in Government Relations Coalition. It's a nonprofit that I'll talk to you about a little later on. I'm also an introverted extrovert. I spent about a week in Omaha with my colleagues, which I truly enjoyed it. But then I had to go into my hole this weekend to make sure that I would regain the energy to be in front of you today.
You guys know about the recharge, I'm sure.
Yes, exactly. And I'm just a lover of what I get to do because at the end of the day, it's about making a positive impact in people's lives. And I love being a champion for people so that they can thrive in whatever that looks like for them.
And she's very good at it too. She's being modest. She's very good at it too. Good morning, everybody. My name is Whytne Brooks, happily from New York Life Insurance Company. My background is I started out as a lawyer. So I went to Columbia for law school. That's how I ended up in New York. Started out at a law firm, White Shoe Law Firm, right across from Grand Central for about 6 years, doing white collar litigation, all of that fun stuff that just puts everybody right to sleep. And then when I made the decision that I wanted to go in-house and sort of focus on one area instead of whatever happened to come down the road, happened to find New York Life. And for me, I don't know that anybody grows up wanting to be an insurance lawyer. I have not met that child yet.
Makes it look easy.
But for me, it was mostly about the fact that I just fell in love with the people there. Everybody was so nice. And the way that I described it is the difference between my law firm and New York Life is at New York Life, people ask you how your weekend was, and they stick around long enough to hear the answer, which was not the case at my previous employer. So I was a litigator there for about 4 years. Came to DC in May of 2019, started lobbying, working in our federal government affairs team, and I've been having a blast ever since. So that's a little bit about me. So throughout the day, or these next few hours, you all are going to hear more about diversity in the workforce and other areas that are equally important. We're just going to touch on those things as they relate to what we do. As lobbyists and lobbyist adjacent and all the great things happening here in the Hill. I don't know about you, but I feel like branding the state of the government is a bit of a loaded. I feel like they set us up. There's a lot to say about the state of the government. We're going to focus on the D&I piece for now. So shall we launch into it? Is that okay with everybody? Yeah. Okay, they're awake. Oh, this is great. This is great. Okay. So first off, I don't have to tell you guys about what you do. What you do is vitally important for your clients. What you do is very personal to your clients. And there's no need for you to have an identical background to the person that you're working with, but it adds a little something extra, I suppose, if you're working with somebody who understands, sympathizes with, or maybe even experienced the same life experience that you've had. So just as random example, if you'll indulge me, I wanted to share with you, this was a tweet thread that went viral back in 2018 from the medical profession, which I thought actually really did a good job at encapsulating what it means to have that extra diversity in the room to make a difference. This is a doctor, black male doctor, who I think works in Georgia. So he says, I had a patient this week who came in with left leg weakness over the last week. Younger black guy in his 30s, brain MRI clearly indicates multiple sclerosis. So we all go in during morning rounds to give my man his diagnosis. He has a bit of a blank stare as he listens to my attending try to explain what he has. He was told earlier he might have had a stroke, and now we're telling him he doesn't have a stroke. But he's clearly processing what he does have and just says nah to having any questions. So we're running the patient list after rounding, and as we get to him, my attending says something like, I don't know if apathy is a word, but it just seems like he doesn't care. He laughs, and so does the rest of the team. I'm sitting there like, this isn't it. And definitely, I was the only one in the room. So after running the list, I don't even stick around with the team. I go straight back to the guy's room, and the code switch was automatic. Look, man, I know that all that was a lot. did you really get what the doctor was saying? And he looked at me with a face of relief. Now I'm going into detail on multiple sclerosis, how it's different from a stroke and what it means for him long term. The real validation came when he interrupted me early on and said, oh, so it's a brain thing that I have. And I said, yes, my man, it's a brain thing. And now my friend understands what he has, why we need the tests we need, and what the rest of his life might look like, all because I could recognize what everyone else seemed to miss from a cultural perspective. So just like one small example that I thought was fascinating, and that's not to say that that gentleman didn't get the perfect standard of care from someone else, but sometimes there's a little bit extra that comes from like having a diverse team in the room. So I think in some circles, diversity, equity, inclusion has lost a little bit of its meaning. It's become an acronym and all the alphabet soup that we have these days. It's become kind of a corporate buzzword. To us, to me, I think diversity and inclusion is really just meeting people where they are, which you all do every single day, all day, and you've been doing it before it became the popular thing to do. We all know that this country is trending toward being a majority minority country, meaning the majority of folks will be from some sort of minority background. That's not to say it's any one minority, but just overall. And at New York Life, as an example, half of our life sales comes from what we call cultural markets, which are diverse minority markets. So considering that this is where things are headed, it only makes sense from a business standpoint, from just sort of a internal standpoint of doing the right thing, it makes sense to have a diverse team to make sure you're serving your customers as best as you can. It's a boon to historically underrepresented, underserved communities to cultivate talent like you all have from within and be able to use that same talent to help build financial wealth and security and literacy in those same communities where they came from. So hopefully, I'm just telling you guys things that you already know, but I wanted to emphasize how valuable all of you are. And this room itself is incredibly diverse, which like warms my cold, dead heart. And so I'm happy to see that this is going in the right direction. So that's kind of just a little bit about you all.
Yes, no, I'm so glad that you brought that example forward. It's such a powerful one.
I think so too.
And the work that you do with your clients is so incredibly important, the support that you provide and those perspectives that you all are exchanging, right? Like you bring perspectives to them and they then bring those perspectives to you. And it's incredibly important that we do the same thing internally because as Whytne mentioned, you know, DEI is something that all companies have committed to, or majority companies have committed to, or recommitted to, because it's simply the right thing to do. At Mutual of Omaha, we really believe that together we achieve greatness, and we have had a long-standing commitment to celebrating the unique strengths and differences of all people. And one of the things that, we have a three-pronged pillar. Three of the things that we really focus on are building an inclusive and diverse workforce, striving to cultivate a culture of belonging, a workplace culture of belonging, and really fully committing to our marketplace, the customers that we serve and the communities where we live and work. We think that's really important. And we partner across the enterprise to make this happen. We partner with talent acquisition to ensure that we are attracting and hiring diverse talent and building really strong pipelines externally. We partner with our corporate learning and development teams to ensure that our associates really have the programming and resources that they need to really bring that cultivation to life when we're talking about a culture of belonging. And we also make sure that there are pathways for growth for our associates with our partners, because we want to make sure that they're staying at Mutual. We think that retention is really important, and we know that that is a pathway to retention, is ensuring that they have growth ahead when they join the company. We also want to make sure that we have strong internal pipelines. We know that that's important. And when we talk about supporting our customers, we know that diverse representation among our agent and advisor network is incredibly important as well, because we know that increases the support that we provide them. In addition to that, we just know that those perspectives, as I mentioned, are so incredibly valuable when we increase the support that we provide, and when we are thinking about the perspectives that we can bring to lawmakers. We know that the customer's voice is incredibly important, and you are the conduit to lawmakers in that space. I'm going to check my notes so I can make sure that I made sure that I had some notes because I want to make sure that I bring all
They
of
said there's
the
going to be a lot of
important-
content today.
Yes.
No kidding.
Mhm. And so, with that, we know that it doesn't matter that if it's internal or external, right? We want to make sure that the relationships that we are building are important. They're incredibly important to the work that we do. And you are very close to the customer, and that proximity really brings that important perspective to our legislators. So let's think about this for a second. We'll take it to a basic level. There are probably things in your day that you've been made aware of as you're moving about the city and your neighborhoods, and you've thought, gosh, who was involved in that decision? Think about speed bumps, right? Speed bumps, they certainly make us more safe. They slow down those people who have a little bit of a lead foot in our neighborhoods, but they can also impede our emergency responders, our emergency vehicles, right? So, there's sometimes some adverse impact if they're overused. Think about street closures, think about directional changes with some of the streets. Of course, we do this and we see this because we want to make things more walkable. We want people to be able to ride their bikes. This reduces our carbon footprint. It also ensures that we are more healthy. We're closing our rings, our rings on our Apple Watch. But the adverse impact of that could be that our elderly neighbors are unable to navigate our neighborhoods. Another community, part of our community, folks who are living with disabilities could also be impacted by some of those changes. So these are just a few of the examples, and I'm sure that you can think of more that we really need to make sure that we're thinking holistically about some of the policy changes that we bring forward. Let me make sure. So not all of us can bring those perspectives, right? But some of us can. And we want to be really intentional about the way that we do that. I know that when we are conducting research, we're writing policy language, or just bringing those perspectives, we need to be really intentional and thoughtful about the way that we interpret some of the policies that we see and some of the assumptions that we make about those policies, because when we're relying solely on our own understanding or our own experiences, that can really limit the way that we see what those outcomes can be.
So with that, let's kind of dig into the last section that Cicely and I wanted to get into with you all, which is, I guess, really what's true to the state of the government part of the branding of our panel. So I think to lobby, to advocate on any topic that has the potential to be personal, the potential to even be controversial, what's critical is to be able to cut through the thicket, cut through the hype of what it may seem to be, and actually focus on what it means to Americans, what it means to the people that you're seeing on a daily basis, what it means to you. So as an example, how many people are from a company that have, like, we call them employee resource groups or something similar to that? Show of hands. Folks are familiar with that concept. Okay, I wish there were more hands, but it's okay. We'll start somewhere. Okay, so when I switched from being a litigator to a lobbyist, I was a co-chair of our Black ERG. So that was in 2019, 2-year stint for us. So I was also an ERG co-chair in 2020, which, as I don't have to explain to you all, being the co-chair of a Black employee resource group in the midst of everything that was happening in 2020 was not for the faint of heart, very challenging, very rewarding at the same time. And just because of the intensity of that experience, there was no way that that was going to be left out of my conversations with lawmakers who are interested in advancing the principles of DE&I. And so, as an example, last Congress, the chair of the Diversity and Inclusion Subcommittee of the House Financial Services Committee, Joyce Beatty from Ohio, amazing woman, had a chance to meet with her. And just like the meetings that you all probably will have tomorrow, I think it's usually an exercise most used in storytelling And so I told her my story, what I just shared with you guys about coming from New York down to DC, never having, done the White House tour or didn't major in poli-sci. I was an anthropology major, all these things. And sort of just understanding what it was like to be here, and how the entire reason I ended up here is because my general counsel at the time is the type who's really good at like learning your personality and what makes you tick. And she realized that I'm kind of wasted behind a desk in a windowless office all day, and decided to send me down to DC to be out in the world with my blue hair and like representing New York life and kind of breaking up the stereotype of what it means to be. I'm still a dork, so some of the stereotypes about insurance people are true.
Don't listen to her. Not a dork.
So the storytelling, I think, is a very important component to all this. What you saw most recently in the most recent Congress, in terms of like tangible legislation on diversity, things like board diversity, workforce diversity. The House Financial Services Committee would occasionally send out data requests for DE&I to different industries, like sector by sector, to kind of kick the tires. And again, with that, you can hand over an Excel sheet or a PDF that has all of your numbers, but you need to give the story behind it too. And a lot of the lawmakers, even if there isn't legislation on the table that you're actively talking about, they're people too. They'll go to sleep if it's not very interesting, and they want to know about like the DNA of your company, about like, how did you get in front of me right here, right now? Like, what is your story? And especially if you're from a background that emphasizes diversity in different ways, like the pipelines and all the different ways that you can arrive, we're all in the same room together. I think it makes you that much more memorable of an advocate. We all know that in the House, at least the majority flipped. And I think there is still an emphasis on diversity and inclusion, just from a different angle. So now, instead of having a subcommittee, to use House Financial Services as an example, D&I is one of the tenets underlying each subcommittee. And so through each of their lenses, they can find a way to dig into diversity and inclusion. It might be about women's issues or regional diversity or something like that. So it's not all lost, despite what you might hear. Everybody who's been a champion for it before will continue to be a champion for it. And from the corporate perspective, I think when you have a change in majority, a change in thinking, there's a temptation, I should say, to want to curate your message depending on who's running the show. I think, and Cicely knows this well, to be a good advocate, to be a good lobbyist, like your word is your bond. You want to make sure people understand that you can be trusted, that you're a wise source of information based on what you do, and that you're not going to be wishy-washy depending on who you're talking to. So shooting straight down the middle, because your companies aren't going to change every time the majority changes. Like whatever you do for diversity now, you're likely to dig more into or continue in some way. So because I know, I won't name names, but I know like some colleagues of mine who it's sort of like, stripes or polka dots. You want to be somebody who's going to be an honest broker and shoot straight down the middle, and make sure that that message comes across. So, I mean, I think that's kind of the gist of it. I won't bore you with like actual like legislation, like bill numbers and things like that, but happy to share more to the extent that anybody's interested in what actually is coming down the road. I will also mention you're seeing a lot more focus on, or maybe I should say more frequency of proposals relating to diversity in the regulatory arena now too. So the SEC is thinking about like a human capital rule and a board diversity rule. So lots of different things. It definitely keeps the two of us very busy, in addition to all the other topics that we cover. But I think it's fascinating, and I think the bottom line, if everybody just went to sleep until the end of this piece of what I'm saying, just bear in mind the fact that I think in this town, people are very good at reading people. They can tell when you're authentic. They can tell when you're earnest, and especially when you're coming from a place where you are genuinely passionate about DE&I, whatever that means to you, whatever capacity you experience it, because it might not be the same in Omaha as it is in New York, but that will come across. And it's, I think, important to me that you all understand that that's something that you should emphasize in your conversations with the lovely folks that you're going to be meet with these next couple days.
Yeah, and I just want to really applaud the fact that you brought in and emphasized that we now see DEI kind of spread across, aspects of the committee. And the reason why I bring that up is because I know that there are companies that are now trying to make sure that we are integrating across our businesses and not keeping DEI siloed wherever that function is situated within your company. It's incredibly important because once we kind of apply it, it really is something that can be applied across everything. I'm sure that you use it in the way that you make sure that you are interacting with your clients and customers, the way that you meet their needs, you meet their unique needs. It definitely has probably a twinge of DEI to it. And to your point about representation, it's one of the reasons why I co-founded the Diversity, Equity, and the Diversity in Government Relations Coalition, the nonprofit. It's really meant to help the government affairs industry diversify its ranks. It's ultimately meant to make sure that we're reducing that adverse impact of some narrow policy decision making. And the more that we can make sure that we're bringing that diversity to Congress, bringing those diverse perspectives, diverse ideas to Congress, I think the more it improves the impact of legislation. Right, we want to make sure that we're mitigating any unintentional impact of poor decision making. So.
Should we close out?
I think
Should we release them to the rest of the programming?
Yes. We're so glad you're here. We're here if you have any questions. Get us on LinkedIn. Happy to chat afterwards if you need to. But so glad that we were able to spend time with you today.
Thank you all for coming to our little town.
Yeah.